A very good morning to you. You're right on time. This is Inside Politics, your premier political show where we get to discuss political and policy issues that have developed throughout the week. Now, the National Security Advisory Council has moved to quell the message of division that is slowly becoming synonymous with the return of political activity in the country. A raft of directives in line with the Public Order Act are said to be followed during all public meetings. But will the measures guarantee to tame the defiant political class? Is it a breach in basic right to associate? Also, the National Prayer Day hosted at State House Nairobi yesterday saw the country strike a reconciliatory tone led by President Uhuru Kenyatta, who himself asked for forgiveness from those he's wronged. But as that happened, Raila Odinga was attempting to break the jinx in Bondo, hosting over 700 Gikuyu elders in what is seen as a hint to major realignments. Finally, governors eyeing the presidency in the 2022 polls will have to resign from their current positions 6 months before the election date. That's according to the High Court. Equally, Justice Weldon Korir has declared the Gatundu North parliamentary seat vacant, and with it, putting at risk around 10 lawmakers who were previously MCAs and failed to resign 6 months prior. Joining me to dissect this particular issues, let me take this opportunity to introduce our panelists. I'll start with Kipchumba Karori, who is an advocate and political strategist. We're also set to join Dismas Mokua, who's a political risk analyst. Many thanks for your time. Mark Bichir, communication strategist. Hesbon Owila, a political risk analyst, and also joining us today is Gloria Orwoba, who's a youth policy analyst. Gentlemen and lady, many thanks for your time. Looking forward to your contributions right here on Inside Politics. Remember, back at home, you can also interact with us. The hashtag to use, Inside Politics, at KTN News KE, at the Jesse Rogers. Let's start with the very first point which happened earlier on during the week, where the National Security Advisory Council warned that the flaring political temperature threatens the country's security. In light of the Murang'a chaos that claimed the lives of 2, the council has issued a raft of directives that aim to quell the tensions. Targeted by the directives are politicians who will have to seek police approval 3 days before holding any gathering. Brian Otieno with that report.
The return of political activity brought with it the synonymous message of division, the ugly side of political gatherings manifesting in Sunday's clashes in Murang'a that claimed 2 lives. Politicians from opposing sides of the divide have blamed each other for the chaos and further for fanning ethnic flames, none taking any responsibility. All this at a time when political gatherings remain banned owing to the COVID-19 pandemic, a ban politicians have consistently flouted.
Some individuals are taking advantage of the vulnerabilities in our population occasioned by the socio-economic shocks of COVID-19. In pursuit of cheap publicity, these individuals, in attempt to further their selfish political agenda, are inciting the youth who are fearful of their future. They are attempting to radicalize the youth to the point where they have fought and in one tragic incident killed each other.
But the latest development from the National Security Advisory Committee hints that the government has bowed to the defiance of politicians, even as it issued directives that covertly relaxed the ban on such gatherings. Key among the directives is the requirement that holders of political gatherings seek approval from the police.
The convener or any person intending to hold a public meeting or a public procession shall A, notify the officer commanding station, that is OCS, of such intent at least 3 days, but not more than 14 days before the proposed date of the public meeting or procession.
This as the National Cohesion and Integration Commission warned against a repeat of the country's darkest political history if the rhetoric over the 2022 elections isn't toned down.
What we are witnessing in the country today is a likely precursor of violent conflicts that would lead to loss of lives, destruction of property, and the displacement of people, such as witnessed during the 2007-2008 post-election violence.
Even as the National Security Advisory Council claims to be keen on curtailing ethnic tensions, the directives issued offer no guarantee to tame the madness witnessed in recent weeks by a defiant political class. Brian Otieno, KTN News.
Well, that's the latest in terms of that move by the National Security Advisory Council to quell the message of division and the political activity in the country. We just want to start on that note. Allow me to bring into this conversation Dismas Mukua. It would be interesting to note how exactly this move is perceived, because according to the head of public service, Joseph Kinyua, it's meant to quell the animosity that is building up in the country. How do you think it is actually, Dismas?
When you look at the Public Order Act and related legislation and what the head of the public service indicated, there's really nothing new. He was merely reminding Kenyans, especially politicians, that if you want to engage in any political rally, any political meeting, you must do it in a procedural manner. And we've seen politicians being reminded times above number about these requirements, that you have to make a notification to the OCS 3 days before, and so that there is a security provided. And it's important for us to do this so that the security is at 3 levels: for the politicians, for the unsuspecting Mora attending the political rally, and also for the people in the neighborhood who don't care or who don't follow politics. That's very important. But again, when you look at it now from a national level, that act should not be applied in a manner which is very selective to disenfranchise any politician, because it's very clear, even to a very naive political analyst, that that reminder is directed to the Deputy President William Samoei Ruto. And you saw as a result, a number of his meetings have been cancelled or moved forward. So what works for the goose should work for the gander, and these rules must be applied. If they're going to be applied, then let them be applied across the nation, not in a very selective manner. Because you recall, the former Prime Minister Raila Odinga has had 2 big functions, and it should be interesting to establish whether or not his team actually notified the pertinent or the local OCS 3 days before it happened. And also those meetings, if you look at them with a lot of interest, you see that there was a breach of COVID-19 protocols. And those are some of the reasons which were given when the meetings by the Deputy President were cancelled or moved forward. So if you're going to be a very strong nation that respects the rule of law and order, let's apply these rules across the board. But again, it's not lost on observers that the same Deputy President William Samoei Ruto, when he was in good books with the administration, he was very happy when the same act was being used against political competition. At that stage, he did not condemn it. He didn't even raise his fingers. But now that it's coming to haunt him, it's coming home, then his people are making noise. But for us to make progress as a nation, let's be sure that these rules work across the board. They must not be used selectively. They must not be used to settle political scores.
Right, Hezbon, I mean, the use of this particular law and the selective enforcement is something that is set to worry all of us. But in terms of, even as we continue with this, in terms of the breach of human rights, is there an option that this is definitely an issue we should look at with the Public Order Act? And just talk to us about this.
I think I agree with you, Jesse, that there's a risk of clawing back on the gains that we've made as far as civil liberties are concerned. That if this law is going to be applied to stop, Kenyans from the freedom to assemble, the freedom to express themselves, and freedom to even associate, then it's something that we all need to be worried about, because those are rights that are in our constitution. But then if you situate it broadly, you'll have to understand that there is always a greater good in any law that is enforced.
All right, we seem to be having a challenge with the connection with Hesbon Owila. Let me just forward that particular question to Kipchumba Karuri, even as we get your take, Wakili. I mean, it would be interesting for you to touch on the issues that are arising, especially when it comes to the human rights violation. But we've also seen the selective enforcement. What's your take on these pertinent issues arising on that particular move by the Security Advisory Council?
Thank you, Jess. Thank you for having me in this particular show. First of all, I begin by underscoring the fact that all of us as citizens of this nation and as people who have been here and have read through our historical issues with the election violence and all other things, support any initiative that tries to make sure that the issues of political intolerance is arrested at the earliest opportunity. Be it as it may, it should be noted out that, JC, you cannot use the Public Order Act to curtail constitutionally ordained freedoms and rights. The freedom of assembly, the freedom of association, the media freedoms are things that are already ordained in the Constitution. And also, when you are curtailing Chapter 4 rights, you cannot curtail them by an institution that is not known in law. NSAC as is or as constituted is not domiciled in any article or in any act of parliament. So that is where we begin. Two, there is the issue of talking the truth to power. And the point is this: let us call a spade a spade. This communication by the Chief of Public Service was targeted to William Ruto and to curtail the Asla Nation wave. That is the point. And if today we are to develop laws and other things that target politicians, we will not move forward as a nation. If today you develop laws to just target Raila Odinga and his caliphate or William Ruto and his caliphate, will we ever move forward as a nation? My thinking is no. And we need to come back to the question that why will you need OCS to give a deputy president, for example, a permit to hold a rally? That presupposes that there is intelligence which the OCS can access and the deputy president cannot access. Some of these questions, run on the face of logic. The other question we need to ask ourselves is this: why will you use a different set of rules for a different set of politicians? We are creating a society where there will be despots at the end of the day. Look at it this way. There was a rally yesterday in Mauche held by Gideon Moi. The number of people, it was a huge rally. Did they have a license? We don't know. Did they commit to the issues of COVID-19 rules? It was visible. There was no social distancing. Nobody had a mask. Those are the things we need to do as a society. Whereas you allow Alfred Mutua to do a rally in Tharaka Nithi, you disperse Kalwale and Washali in Kakamega County. You disperse Malala from doing a rally in Viga County. What you are creating, Jesse, is not a nation of people who will obey the rule of law. You are creating a nation of rebels without a cause, because people are justified to disobey laws that do not mean the ends of justice at the end of the day. And therefore, what we must urge those in power is to make sure that we develop a criteria upon which all of us are subjected to the same law. It cannot be business whereby you allow other people to advance their political rights and you curtail others. My final point will be this in this issue of curtailing the right of assembly. You have several by-elections scheduled in the coming days. When you apply this rule on an election like Musambweni, it gives results which are in essence undemocratic, because the only person who is supposed to regulate rallies in an area where there is a by-election is IBC, because it is independent. But in this case, you allow an OCS to be the one issuing licenses for holding a rally. What if tomorrow the OCS is conflicted, the other side in their own by-election? It will result in results which are not democratic, and such a result can be challenged in an election court. Therefore, we need to, at all times, even as we try to make sure that the political intolerance is curtailed, it must be curtailed in a constitutional manner. The other thing, as a finality, Jesse, the point we must make is that the OCS has no legal basis to license a rally. The law states that they are only supposed to be notified. as captured by my friend Dismas Mokua, for purposes of providing security. They are not supposed to approve a rally or a meeting. Freedom of association in itself, you are born with it. You are born with the right to associate, unless in clear-cut basis where the law has said this will be limited. Thank you.
All right, Kipchumba. It would be interesting to get the take of Gloria Oroba, who's definitely representing the women in this particular panel. Gloria, your take in terms of the balancing, and it's an intricate balance, we believe, in terms of taking care of the right to association on the other side, ensuring that the animosity is actually quelled and nipped at the bud. What's your take, Gloria?
In fact, I want to motivate or challenge Kenyans to go and read the Public Order Act and Cap 56. This is not a new one. It didn't come about because of COVID. It was actually, I think, gazetted in March 2019. So this is simply a reminder of how to conduct public gatherings or processions. It's a reminder of what is needed or your responsibility as a convener of a public gathering on what you should actually, the check boxes to notify the authorities, to do this and that. It is really just a reminder. Although when you read this act, you'll actually see that there are three things that will stop a public gathering or a public procession. There is a regulatory authority, that is the police. And you can see there that they've said in the act that unless the convener of the gathering or the people in the gathering are actually have come about with weapons, then there's grounds to actually stop that public gathering. Or if they are usurping the power of the police, when you have these goons who want to take over the restriction of the police and asserting the power of the police, then there is right to stop that. And the other thing is that if there is evidence that that public gathering is actually instigating the public to violence, not just instigating them to anything, but towards violence. Because the spirit of this public act was that we are ensuring that when you have the public gathering or when you have a public procession, that there is no breach of peace to the public. There's no breach of peace. So now, the gray area here, and that is the reason why a lot of people are uncomfortable with what is going on. The gray area here is when you say breach of peace, there is no definition in that public act. There is no definition, even in the amendments, of what the breach of peace constitutes of. Let me give an example. The issue of when you are convening a gathering, people should not convene with weapons. Say, for instance, I go to the Agricultural Society of Kenya, and the president is there, and they are showcasing the farming, they are showcasing our military, they are showcasing so many things. There are jembes, there are bars, there are things that are construed to be weapons. But because of the nature of the gathering, the nature of the Agricultural Society of Kenya, then at that moment and in that element, then they are not seen as the people gathering with weapons to try and reach the peace. So now the issue and the gray area is who then decides what this breach of peace looks like? And is it, even if it lies on that authority, the regulating authority, whether it is the OCS or whether it is the WHO, remember again, the Constitution says that the burden of proof of any offense is not given to the person, to the victim. If I come and say that, by the way, umenikosea, then it is not the victim who's supposed to now say, oh, sijakukosea because nimefanya hivi. The burden of proof actually lies with the person who's alleging the same. So when the stuff happened, when we had the Moranga issue, and I could hear people calling out and saying, oh, the Tanga team should come out and prove indeed that there was no disturbance and the disturbance did not come from their team, and they should prove this. First of all, we saw the public being tear gassed in a religious house, and so when I come and say that there is breach of peace, then me as the regulating authority, I should come and say there is breach of peace. And the burden of proof lies on me, and I say, here is where you breached. You have brought about this weapon, I have this evidence, you have pushed this and that. The bias right now in this Public Order Act, which if you ask me, is completely constitutional. It is actually drafted in a way that it should be. There is a gray area on now the definition of breach of peace. Who defines the threshold of that breach of peace? Even with the NEMA authority, If I want to call NEMA because my neighbors are playing loud music, they have a baseline of what it constitutes for it to move from entertainment and acceptable noise into it becoming now a breach of peace for the public.
Okay.
But we don't have this definition of breach of peace.
Okay,
whether
Gloria.
in the amendment in Part 56, we don't have it in the Public Order Act, and that is now what is being used as a political tool. Because we saw Raila Odinga convening his gathering, and we saw that he actually was given
all right, Gloria. It seems the fine point, the fine margin, breach of peace is definitely something we should look into. I'd like to bring in Mark Bichir. What is your thought on this whole issue? Especially since it seems to be targeting a certain particular political class, if we can call it the hustler nation. That seems to be the narrative with this Public Order Act. On the other side, are you with the same school of thought with James Orengo, which seems to be which he actually mentioned that, they were actually very adamant in pushing for the Security Amendment Bill in 2014. They should enjoy the tear gas now if it's falling their way. What's your thought?
My thought is, number one, that the Public Order Act is not a new act, and it's an act that we do need. How do I know that we do need it? I was watching a video yesterday about Onwan Buzeki, who was running for governor in Uasin Gishu in 2017, and how the public basically manhandled him for giving his political opinion. And the way things are flaring up now, if you go to the Twitter feed after this show and read how intolerant Kenyans are, there is a great need to tone down the abuses, to tone down the kind of political conversations that we are having, because we are not having objective conversations. We are busy shouting at each other. So yes, there is a need to tone down how we are doing things. There is a need to manage it. However, it is also true that using the law in a skewed manner is not correct, that it needs to be balanced, and if Raila Odinga's meetings are peaceful and there is no threat to the people, let them happen. And if Ruto's meetings are peaceful and no threat to the people, let them happen. However, if Raila Odinga's meetings are causing violence and there's hate speech and things like that, then we need to shut down those meetings. So let me give an example. There was a meeting in Bondo yesterday between elders of the Kikuyu and many people from Bondo. It was a largely peaceful meeting. Why would we shut it down? But there was a meeting in Uasin Gishu where Buzeki was almost beaten up for giving his opinion. That meeting needs to be shut down. And if you're looking for a threshold, that is a very good threshold, that if there is violence and the likelihood of violence, then we need to stop those meetings regardless of which side of the political divide these things are. But again, we must also ask ourselves as a country, do we need these rules 2 years to an election? Is this the time for us to do endless politicking and endless campaigning about 2022? When will we ever learn? Elections are not an emergency. 3 months is enough time to campaign, and in our constitution, we've got 6 months to campaign. I think the people who are campaigning, whether it's Raila Odinga, who's our envoy at large in Africa, or the deputy president, who's our deputy president in Kenya, if they want to do...
Jesse, a point of correction.
Yeah, sure.
A point of correction to Mark Bichir when he's saying that the threshold is what he sees, the convening we had in Uasin Gishu versus whichever convening. That is not how bills or laws are drafted, and that is not a clear definition of what it constitutes to breach peace. And actually, to take it a step further, it is the responsibility of the government to sensitize the public on what this act really constitutes of, and it is the responsibility to come out and explain even to those youth that, by the way, breach of peace, this is what is going to be categorized as you having breached the peace of that public area. But we cannot start using biases based on political divides, that one in Uasin Gishu should have been shut down because I put
Gloria, let's give Bichir a right of reply. Yes.
Let me finish my thing. You know, the law is not separate from common sense. Okay, you do not need a law to know that if a man is slapping his wife, you need to stop him and stop. There is no law that prescribes that you need to get a license to stop someone from being beaten. So we might hide in the definitions and terms, but common sense still prevails. And the truth of the matter is, a meeting, let me finish, a meeting that has violence needs to be stopped. And if Raila Odinga is holding a meeting that has violence, it needs to be stopped. But in this particular case, there is a meeting where Buzeki was being roughed up. It needed to be stopped. And the people who held that meeting and allowed for one of the people who was participating in this meeting to be harassed also need to be taken to the book. That is how we restore law and order.
All right, Bichachi.
Let us stop Bichachi for a minute and we help him understand some things.
Well, it's definitely getting heated up. A lot of reactions there. We'll definitely get to hear what exactly Kipchumba Karuri has to say on that, even as we take a look at what you're saying on social media. But remember, after this short break, we'll definitely have to take a look at those particular meetings that were held yesterday. One was held in Bondo, where Raila Odinga met with roughly 700 Gikuyu elders. What exactly is this meant to mean? Even as we take a look at the peaceful factor in this particular meeting. Not just that, the national prayer session that was held in State House, Nairobi. We also take a look at that and what it portends for the country going forward.